What happened to Ace? As we make the left turn, the horrifying space behind us is quickly replaced by a quiet emptiness ahead. The Wrangler crawls, defeated, towards the waiting convoy. The remaining 4 cars are parked haphazardly, taking up more than half the road. Rob drifts to the far end of the tarmac, looking to overtake and resume formation. Both of his hands rest on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on some distant point in space. It's not hard to imagine that behind the focus and quiet control, there's a man in turmoil, a man who can't bring himself to say anything, in fear of saying too much. It would be simple to describe what had just taken place, or at least summarize the barest facts. What happened to Ace, where he is now, why he won't be coming back. But for some reason, I can't utter a word about what's transpired. Something about the event itself makes it impossible to retell, as if the requisite phrases have been locked behind glass. Shortly after we'd turned the corner out of Sycamore Row, Rob implied that the rest of the day's drive would be uneventful. Had he waited just a few minutes longer, he would have been entirely correct. We're on the road for another 4 hours, both of us quietly attending to our own preoccupations as the forest gradually thins out. The landscape gives way to rolling cornfields that stretch out behind the horizon on both sides. Nothing noticeable happens, which is ironic, as I find myself typing up a lot more notes than I need. With the sun descending through an orange sky, we pull into a clearing just beside a wild grove of apple trees. Rob turns off the ignition and the 2 of us sit in silence. Rob needs to concentrate on driving, had been a good excuse to stay quiet, a good excuse to not face each other. Now the wheels aren't turning, however, and the true reasons for our mutual reticence is all too clear. Rob's response isn't reassuring, and I'm oddly grateful for that. There are no comforting words he can give me, and any attempt would have seemed horrifically insincere, a mockery of the situation's onerous gravity. Anyway, given the circumstances of Ace's capture, I'm not even sure which answer I want to hear. Lilith appears at my window, rapping her knuckles against the glass with an aggressive impatience I'd expect nothing less about now. Everyone in the convoy has been made to follow a unilateral order. Rob's order, without explanation. They've been travelling for hours, accompanied by the glaring absence of other human beings. Looking in the wing mirror, I glimpse the rest of the convoy, standing by their cars, watching the Wrangler expectantly. Rob's hands still haven't left the wheel. With a sharp intake of breath, I push the door open and step out onto the grass. The ground is soft below me as I walk over to the group. There's recently been rain. I began to address the rough semicircle. It almost feels like one of Rob's briefings. I meet Apollo's eye. For the briefest of moments, I considered telling them all exactly that. Maybe it would save them from the slow, heavy ache that's currently weighing down my chest. Maybe it would just save me from a difficult conversation. Either way, I know I can't lie to them. They deserve the truth, however unpleasant. The answer doesn't come easily. I'm being pressed to say the words aloud, and in doing so, to fully acknowledge what happened. It feels like I'm being driven to a funeral, like I'm being verbally marched towards an open casket. I hadn't heard Rob step out of the car when he reached the group. It's hard to hide my relief as he takes over proceedings, addressing the group matter-of-factly. Now it is really like one of his briefings. 2 guys in the tow truck, coming out of jubilation. They got him. The way they were treating him, he won't last long. Rob shouldn't have said that. I understand his reasons, of course. He wants to convey an important truth, that nothing can be done, or could have been done, to save Ace. His ghastly choice of words does the job, but it also sends a ripple of disturbance throughout the crowd, planting in everyone's minds the gruesome image I've been trying all day to uproot. Bonnie covers her mouth in shock and sorrow. Eva turns noticeably pale, and even Lilith, who is intent on leading the questioning, is taken aback. I nod solemnly. The group bristles at my affirmation. Before I can finish my statement, my words are cut off by something truly unexpected. In spontaneous response to my words, a harsh outburst of mocking, sarcastic laughter rings out from within the convoy. One by one, we all turn towards its source, until we all find ourselves staring at Blue Jay. Her unapologetic chuckling fills the silent night air. The left-right game is a hoax. The group is taken aback by Blue Jay's incredulous tirade. She's clearly been holding her tongue since day one. Our reaction to Ace's capture representing just one step too far. My mother used to tell me that you can't strike a person from the high road. Staring down the barrel of Blue Jay's darkly self-satisfied grin, I'm more than tempted to make the descent. Blue Jay turns to Rob, fixing him a glare of pure, unadulterated triumph. Rob's face looks like it's been carved from granite. The group looks to him for an answer, but he delivers his response directly to Blue Jay, his eyes locked with hers. The atmosphere changes, and for a moment, the night erupts into a foray of whispers. Rob's answer clearly means something to everyone but me. As condescending as her delivery may be, her words spark a sudden realization. It's true that with an unspeakably high budget and a few deaf stooges, you could probably replicate most of what we've seen on the road. Yet without realizing it, I found myself agreeing with Rob's version of events, personally defending the left-right game's validity against its decriers. I'd set off on this journey, much like Blue Jay, as a staunch, confident skeptic. But somewhere between the tunnel and this moment, I'd become a believer. Blue Jay notes my lack of protest and turns back to Rob. Blue Jay pulls a pack of Marlboros out of her coat, lighting up immediately, and goes to sit on the hood of a nearby car. Her demeanour clearly signals that her part in the conversation is over, though her words leave a bitter aftertaste for everyone involved. To sympathise, it must be exhausting, spending 2 days with people whose opinions are diametrically opposed to your own, having to listen in silence while they corroborate their own seemingly preposterous views. Having said that, however, I'm incredibly glad she stopped talking. It reminds me of a time when we got on much better. The next question comes from Eve, her voice quivering. Can we die here, Rob? The quiet force of her words turns everyone's heads back to Rob. It's clear that others have been thinking the same thing, and they're looking to Rob for an answer. In the 1920s, John Ebenrauer killed 36 people and violated their bodies. In one of your videos, you guys went to his home in Virginia looking for the man's ghost. Bonnie and Clyde once spent $500 to stay at the Iowa murder house, a place that's supposed to possess its victims and force them to kill each other. If you all honestly believed in what you were chasing, you should be accepting death as an outcome every time you step out. We are looking for evidence of another world. What we're doing here has the scientific significance of the moon landings, the cultural significance of Columbus reaching the Americas, and a whole lot of people died doing both. If you accepted the risk and chased down the ghost of a 2-bit serial killer, you should be willing to accept the risk for this. Lilith looks like she's been scolded by a parent. There's a fire in her eyes as she observes Rob, meeting his criticism with scorn. He did accept the risk. Ace made his decisions. He saw the dangers of the road firsthand, and he kept on going. I told you this place could be dangerous, and maybe you didn't take that seriously. But you are not going to treat me like I lured any of you here under false pretenses. We stand for a few moments in the uncomfortable void left by Rob's words. No one's quite sure where to look. I ain't gonna make that decision for you. If you want to split off and head back, I suggest you wait till morning and stagger your leaving times by an hour or so. I ain't seen nothing like what happened back there before, but this is the most people I ever played the game with. Maybe that's doing something. It makes sense until Blue Jay laughs once more. Hearing her reaction, I reassess what I'm saying, and I can't help but feel a little foolish by the idea. Rob collects himself, regaining his composure. Either way, you all have till morning to decide if you want to keep on the road. Bristol, if you want to go home, you gotta find someone to take you. I ain't ready to head back yet. He turns away from the group and marches to the Wrangler. I didn't see him again for the rest of the evening, and I have no intention of bothering him. Eve and Lilith immediately crowd around me, asking if I'm alright, and taking it in turns to disparage Rob's actions. I can't bring myself to join in. All I can bring myself to say is, the group has very little to say for the rest of the night. A deep solemnity hangs in the air, dampening any semblance of good cheer, like wet leaves on a dwindling fire. No one offers any conversation. Apollo's reservoir of quips has run dry. Everyone's wondering where they'll be going from here, pondering the sort of person they are in circumstances such as these. Do they press on towards danger, or back towards safe and familiar ground? It's a question they'll have to figure out for themselves, ideally before sunrise. I already have questions of my own. About an hour after Rob's departure, bidding farewell to the rest of the group, I walked over to Lilith and Eve's car. My bag is resting on the front seat. A black wire leading inside from the charging port. I've decided not to tell the pair I've been charging the detonator for a military-grade explosive less than 10 meters away from them. Perhaps it will come out during broadcast. If you're listening to this, sorry girls. I pick up my bag and, checking that no one is looking, make a beeline for the apple grove. I march through the small wood, the air growing still, the sounds of the convoy quickly fading behind me. In the late evening darkness, with the moon shrouded by a legion of crooked trees, I'm puzzled that I'm not more afraid. I've seen what happens on this road, and as I pass through the grove and into the neighbouring field, intentionally isolating myself from the rest of the group, I'm quite aware that help won't be coming for me. Even so, as the corn rises up in every direction around me, I find myself almost incapable of fear. The day's events have drained me of emotion, and now with everything else pulled away, I'm left with only one driving directive: an overpowering urge to figure this road out, regardless of what that entails. Judging the distance I've travelled to be acceptably out of range of the convoy, I take the block of C4 out of my bag and place it on the ground. Gritting my teeth and body cringing with some self-inflicted dread, I press the power button on the Nokia and wait for something to happen. My worries of instant disintegration are allayed slightly as the grainy image of two outstretched hands come into view, swiftly replaced by a menu screen. I work fast, the words on the brown paper package constantly reminding me of what I'm putting at risk with every passing second. Firstly, I type my own number into the phone, assuming, or at least hoping, that the mechanism isn't activated by outgoing calls. A few seconds later, my cell phone rings, giving me the Nokia number. Checking the call logs, I find a second, different number, which seems to have made a call to the phone 3 times in quick succession. If I were a betting woman, which I sometimes am, I'd suggest that this number belongs to whoever built the bomb, the calls representing an attempt to test the trigger prior to its implementation. If I'm right, then this should be the personal number of whoever was driving that crashed car. My third discovery is a little bit more puzzling. No texts have been sent from this phone. However, there is one solitary text residing in the phone's inbox. It's from a third, separate number, and it reads thus: "Please don't do this, Rob." I stare at those 4 words, the new information grating uncomfortably against my already preconceived theories. If this text is to be believed, and my precious deductions are all accurate, then that means Rob Guthard was driving the car, that the C4 in the trunk had belonged to him. All this time, I thought that Rob may have been responsible for something terrible. But what if he was run off the road himself? If that is the case, it leads to an entirely new question. Who was responsible for his crash? As I begin to think it over, the air explodes around me. I'm jolted out of my examination by a powerful, echoing voice which reverberates the very air. The corn is thrown to a frenzy as the noise echoes from every direction, as if spoken by the air itself. Without hesitation, I turn off the Nokia and throw the block into my bag. I jump to my feet and scan the cornfield for whoever spoke the words, backing away towards the convoy. Suddenly realizing how far I am from my friends, I break into a run, my boots pounding the dirt as I fly back to the woods. Less than a minute later, I burst through the trees, my bag swinging with the weight of the block. Everyone's in their cars, seemingly fast asleep. I'm starting to think they're onto something. With no one to talk to and a long day ahead of me, I suppose there's no further recourse but to catch my breath, write up my immediate thoughts, and then finally get some much needed rest. I feel a dull pressure behind my eyes as I step towards the Wrangler, quietly opening the back door next to my sleeping area. I carefully hide the block under my luggage. Then silently, closing the door again, I wander around to the passenger side, where my notes are waiting to be typed. I reach out and grab the handle, gripping it tightly. I don't open the door. In fact, after a moment staring through the glass, I let go. The pressure behind my eyes gives way, and before I know it, I've slid down to the damp ground, my back against the cool, hard metal of the door. A whine catches in my throat as ugly tears stream down my cheeks. My breath shudders as I inhale, and my attempt to breathe out plays to the world as a quiet, declining sob. The tears take me by surprise, but I don't wipe them away. In a bittersweet way, they're welcome, necessary even. They carry with them a familiar sense of heartwarming release. By the time they've run dry, I feel like I might just be able to move on from the events of the day. The sounds in my head are just a little quieter now I've paid them their due. I'm picking myself up when I see Bonnie walking carefully over to the Wrangler. I brush myself off, a little embarrassed at being caught. Bonnie starts to walk back to the car before pausing and turning around. One last piece of comfort to offer. I frown a little, unsure what Bonnie means. She smiles back blankly, then resumes the path to the car. She's mentioned that place before, upon leaving jubilation, in what seemed like a moment of idle reminiscence. How she mentioned it just now doesn't seem like reminiscence at all. After everything that's gone on, all the suspicion I've been directing at Rob, all my worry for Ace, is something the matter with Bonnie? Perhaps I'm misunderstanding. Perhaps Bonnie misspoke. But all the same, the brief comfort her words afforded me has already faded away, leaving a familiar feeling of confusion and paranoia in its place. I let myself into the passenger side, type up a few pressing notes, and then climb through onto the air mattress. Sleep doesn't come easily. I close my eyes and try to convince myself that tomorrow will be better than this harrowing day. Yet every time I make that particular argument, a voice in my head responds, "That may depend on which way you turn."